Hello and welcome to Analysis. I am Oyi Adekunle. As the United States ushers in a new administration of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, the world is awaiting how the government will affect global economy, immigration, security, and a host of other developmental issues. Nigeria, on its part, has a long-standing relationship with the United States that dates back to the 1960s and has been bolstered by past and previous governments. Yes, bilateral relations between both countries under President Donald Trump's administration had its good and bad times. For instance, the United States supported the peacekeeping efforts of Nigeria in a bid to stamp out insurgency, but there were also key migration policies that targeted Nigerians, which got many people questioning the ties between both countries. But what should Nigeria expect from this new government? Achike Chude, a global affairs analyst, now joins me on the program to discuss this. Achike, thank you very much for joining us on the program. And now it's official. Joe Biden has taken over the helm of affairs as the new president of the United States. Now, what could this mean for Nigeria and Africa as a whole?
Well, every American administration has always had one or two things to do with Africa. Of course, right from the George Bush Senior to George Bush Junior to Clinton with his AGOA initiative, to Obama that tried to light up Africa through, generation of electricity, to Trump also, who tried to encourage American investments in Africa. There has always been one or two things that they have done for Africa. But the reality is that, American investment in Africa by the United States, investment by America in Africa has not been as it used to be. And that is because American interest has been dwindling for a very, very long time. Africa continues not to, in terms of production, total output, world output in production, Africa is still very, very low. So Africa is not really, contributing so much to the international community, except in the area of raw materials. And that is why the struggle has continued unabated for exploitation of Africa's raw materials. And I'm sure it is going to continue even the Joe Biden presidency. Africa has so much mineral resources to contribute to the world. Unfortunately, we have not been able to develop them ourselves. But I think that the Joe Biden presidency, at least at the initial stage, you can see the diversity of people that he has been bringing into his administration. He has brought in one or two Nigerians even on board, and then Africans generally. So there's a thinking that they are going to be very, very proactive when it comes to African issues. But I think that one area where they definitely have to do something about is in the issue of insecurity that is plaguing the African continent. So we expect, hopefully, that they are going to be much more meaningfully engaged in the African continent. And not too long ago, Donald Trump promised that he was going to draw down on African troops in the continent, and he began to do that. And of course, we know that the acts of terrorism have not gone down under any circumstance, and so we expect that they are going to engage in terms of trying to ensure that we have a more secured Africa, because a secured Africa is also a secured United States and a secured Europe. Because if you allow acts of terrorism and violence to fester in Africa, the possibility of exportation to the United States and Europe is exceedingly very high, and they do not want that. But I think it is in the area of economy that we want them to engage more. Of course, we know that the Chinese have literally driven everybody else out of Africa because of the quantum of investment that they have been doing in the continent. And I do not think that even neither the Europeans, I think that neither the Europeans and the Americans are in a position to match what the Chinese has been doing. So the Chinese will always continue to be ahead of the Americans when it comes to more meaningful engagement in the African continent.
We can say that probably one of the things that turned the back of Donald Trump against many countries during his tenure was its immigration policy, which was considered rather too strict. We had the travel ban, the Mexico border wall issue, and all of that. Now, do you expect to see so much change in terms of immigration under this new government?
Yes, absolutely. It is good that you mentioned that. That is one area where at least we know that I think they are capable of walking the talk. They have made it very clear, and they have been critical of the Donald Trump immigration policies all this while. do not forget that Trump's mantra was, make America great again. And so he didn't want to engage in the the way the United States has been doing for decades now. And part of it was to try to close the border, to illegal immigration, most especially. The Biden administration has said that I think there are about 11 million unregistered or illegal immigrants in the United States. I'm sure a lot of them are also going to be Africans. And so they are going to try to fast track the possibility, the potential for, uh, uh, getting them, involved into American life as full citizens of America. It might take about, 8 years for them to do that, but at least they have hope. And then with regards to other immigration policies, definitely, I see the Biden administration being very friendly to Africa. The fact of diversity that we have seen in his administration is indicative that they are really, pro-immigrant. They are immigrant-friendly, and so I will see that in the policies that they are going to adopt. It's not. I think that is exactly what is going to happen. I think they will be able to walk the talk when it comes to that issue.
And lastly now, Achike, although this is just an aside, if I can put it like that, but I'd like to also get your reaction on this. The US and China were at loggerheads for a very good part of the Trump administration. And we know what this meant directly or indirectly for international trade. Now, do you think that these tensions may ease a bit under Biden, or do you think the personality of Trump played a key role in the way situations between both countries played out?
Yeah, maybe the personality of Trump might have played a part, but again, Trump, I think, was quite effective, with what he was trying to do with the Chinese, in the sense that he unsettled the Chinese, he unsettled the Chinese economy. And that is not to say that the United States did also not bear the brunt of the disagreements that they had with Trump. So I suspect that the Chinese will be much happier than Trump, that Biden is now the president of the United States. I do not expect to see the kind of vitriolic and the kind of anger that both sides express for one another. Of course, Biden is a more polished politician. He is a more diplomatic person. And so I see that as playing a role in the relationship that the United States will have with China. But I must say that the man that is being touted, or that has been appointed by Biden as the Secretary of State, who is supposed to carry out American foreign policies in places like China and other parts of the world, has also said that he did not see anything and does not see anything wrong with the kind of engagement that Trump had, with China. I think he seemed to believe that America has to also take a very tough stand against China. But again, everything is going to depend not on him, but on the president of the United States. It is the policy of what the president wants to do, in concert with American national strategic, interests, that will determine exactly how the United States is going to engage with China. I would see a bit of a more rosier relationship between the United States and China under the Biden administration. But I think that we are still going to see some of the tension that were generated under the Trump presidency, because the reality is that if America wants to protect its economy, then there is no way that America will not be in conflict with China. Because like Trump, said that China has been getting a lot of free pass when it comes to the United States, and that it was imperative to stop that, because he was trying to say that China was having more of the advantages when it comes to foreign international foreign trade between the United States and then China.
Well, Achike Chude, Global Affairs Analyst, so thank you very much for speaking to us on Analysis. We'll take a very short break here and return to discuss more on this, taking it now from another angle. Don't go away. Welcome back. Now, particularly another area of focus where Nigeria will want to build upon in its bilateral ties with the United States will be in terms of security. And for years, Nigeria's fight against insecurity has been bolstered through U.S. foreign assistance under Donald Trump. But what should the country be expecting now under the new administration of President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris? Security risk management expert Kabiru Adamu now joins me to discuss this on the program. Mr. Kabiru Adamu, thank you very much for your time. Now, how would you describe security relations between the United States and Africa under the Trump administration? And what do you expect from the Biden administration still on security on the continent?
Okay, on the whole, I would say it was a topsy-turvy relationship. At some point, there were some very positive developments, including the improvement of relationship between the U.S. and some countries, in particular Sudan. That was good. We also saw attempts by the Trump administration to come to the support of countries like Nigeria, including the sale of the Super Tucano aircraft. We attempted to do that under a Democratic administration, and it was unsuccessful, but we were able to do it under the Trump administration. Now, that's at the bilateral level between U.S. and some African countries. At the multilateral level, unfortunately, there were a lot of setbacks. The most visible example of that is when U.S. opposed the candidature of the Nigerian who is heading the African Development Bank. One would have thought that given the strategic relationship between the U.S. and most African countries, that the Trump administration would have supported that candidature, but they didn't. Then there were also several other instances where African countries would take a decision on certain issues, and then the U.S. administration would take a counter position at the multilateral level. In the area of global terrorism, there were some very positive developments in terms of the cooperation between the U.S. and Africa, as well as between U.S. and African countries. In particular, training support, especially for strategic military operations, continued under the Trump administration. Nigeria benefited, several other African countries benefited from that training. I've already mentioned equipment sale, which also boosted the counterterrorism effort by most African countries. The U.S. has a base in Niger that has been quite helpful in terms of the provision of intelligence to countries in the Sahel region. The U.S. contribution to the multinational joint task force in the Lake Chad Basin is also worthy of note. Then you also have the U.S. contribution to the G5 Sahel operation in Mali. So on the whole, some positives and unfortunately some negatives. Now, the most concerning aspect is the policy direction by the Trump administration that it would reduce its troop deployment in Africa. This was announced as part of a global effort to reduce U.S. troop deployments across the world, including in Afghanistan. Now, given the fact that a lot of U.S. think tanks, including the U.S. State Department and other intelligence think tanks, have indicated that most of the terrorist groups in the world are relocating to the Sahel, to Africa in particular, and given developments in Burkina Faso, in Mali, and as well as in the Lake Chad region, one is surprised that the U.S. is now thinking of reducing its troop strength in Africa in the midst of this under the Trump administration. So we're hoping that the Biden administration would review this policy because frankly, this is not the time to reduce troop strength in Africa when these security challenges are increasing. Rather, it's time to even increase this type of support to our African countries. So we're hoping that the Biden administration would look at that. We're also hoping that the Biden administration will not renege on promises of weapon support as well as sale to Africa, in particular the Super Tucano to Nigeria. The arrival of those aircraft would be a game changer for Nigeria. And given the fact that the contract has reached almost its final stages, I think it would be quite unfortunate if the Biden administration reneges on that promise. So on the whole, we're hoping to see a continuation of existing strategic relationship as well as the improvement in new areas.
And it appears a country like Nigeria fared better with the Trump administration on security. For instance, Trump agreed to sell 12 Super Tucano jets to Nigeria, as you've rightly said, something that Obama, for instance, refused to do. Do you think that a country like Nigeria now will get this kind of support under Biden?
The U.S. foreign policy is not likely to change significantly under, any administration. The policy is guided by, its overarching interests in Africa. We're not likely to see any significant change in that regard. However, there could be pockets of changes. For instance, if Nigeria does not manage its strategic interests, because in international relations, it is your interest that matters, and how you galvanize that interest is what is important. So if we allow the U.S. to dictate the pace of the relationship, then the Democratic Party may want to institute elements of improved human rights, as well as liberty, diversity, equity, and inclusion aspects into the relationship. And I think that is where Nigeria needs to come up and say, okay, yes, this is what your stand is, but this is where our stand is, so that at the end of the day, the might that Nigeria represents, let's remember Nigeria represents a voice in Africa, and sometimes the direction Nigeria takes also determines the direction some African countries take. And the U.S. is interested in, votes in certain multilateral decisions. So that's, I think, the way to go. It's about strategy, it's about engagement, and it's also about having your stand on certain issues and using your diplomatic power to, achieve what you want to achieve. If we allow the U.S. to dictate the tune of the relationship, then unfortunately we may see a reneging of some of these strategic decisions, including the Super Tucano aircraft, unfortunately.
And what do you think should be the priority of the Biden administration on the issue of security in Africa?
At the end of the day, the most important element of, I would say, the U.S. Focus on Africa is strategic interest in terms of what it wants to achieve. Now, oil used to be a strategic interest. Unfortunately for Nigeria, the U.S. reliance on oil is reducing with fossil oil discovered, and then with technology and renewable energy. And so that has reduced the U.S. strategic interest in Africa, as it were. Now, beyond that, like I mentioned earlier on, the terrorist groups are growing in Africa, in particular in the Sahel region. And if we remember what happened in Dar es Salaam when terrorist groups and Nairobi when attacked U.S. interests there, and including in other parts of African countries, Niger as an example, then I think it would not be in the U.S. interest to ignore these developments. It, of course, in the U.S. interest to galvanize the current global effort to tackle terrorism. So I'm hoping to see increased support, collaboration between U.S. and African countries, in particular Nigeria and Mali, as well as Libya, that have these hotspots for terrorism. Mozambique and Burkina Faso are coming up very, very fast. So I'm hoping to see an improved relationship between the U.S. and some of these governments where there is this emergence. The root causes of this terrorism are things that the U.S. can assist these countries in addressing. As an example, good governance is one area, although unfortunately under the Trump administration, the U.S. claim for the global leadership in some of these efforts has reduced tremendously. But we're hoping that the Biden administration would reverse that and hopefully work with other countries to improve some of these areas. Let's remember that Trump ruled under the America First policy. Biden is likely to, be a bit more outward in terms of his strategic relationship with other countries. So that means better chances for engagement, better chances for both bilateral and multilateral relationships with African countries.
Kabiru Adamu, security risk management expert there, speaking to us on what to expect in terms of security from the new U.S. Administration. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Kabiru Adamu. Thank you. We'll take another short break here, and when we return, we'll discuss something completely different from the U.S.-Nigeria relations. Don't go away. Welcome back. Now, child marriage is one of the biggest challenges confronting children in Africa. According to the United Nations International Children's Education Fund, UNICEF, about 12 million girls marry each year. Unfortunately, despite the fact that child marriage is illegal in Nigeria, it is still prevalent, particularly the country's northern region. At 22 million, Nigeria has the highest number of child brides in West and Central Africa, and it is believed that the figures will keep soaring if adequate steps are not taken to combat these challenges. But joining me now to give us a broader perspective on how critical the issue is joining me now from Kano via Skype is Hope Oduma, who is the Advocacy Campaign and Policy Manager of Save the Children International. Hope, thank you very much for joining me on the program. Now, how serious is this issue of child marriage and child labor in Nigeria?
From my perspective, it's actually more serious than is reported, especially around the northeast and northwestern part of the country. So it's actually a very serious issue. We still have pockets of it in different regions within the country. However, I think it's more predominant in those areas. And if you look at the indicators, you find out that the states that have higher percentages of early marriage are also the states that have the rate of education at a lower level. So they go hand in hand, basically, and that is why it's a serious issue. Apart from early marriage, stopping kids from being in school for as long as they need to be, at least till they complete their secondary education, it also has a lot of health challenges that it poses to the girls that are, would I say, victims of early marriage. So it's actually deeper than what we think or what we see in our news reports. And also the problem is that for an uneducated mother, there's always a likelihood that they're going to have children that will also be uneducated. So the chain continues for generations upon generations. So that is part of what we are trying to stop as an organization, working with, of course, partners, working with governments as well, working with traditional religious leaders, because it is a bigger problem than what one organization can claim to actually solve. There's so much that needs to be done, a lot of behavioral change communication that needs to go into, come into place for us to end child marriage, basically.
Well, we understand that some of the gains your organization have made with the children in Northeast have been eroded with the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, tell us more about this and how challenging it is for you as an organization.
Yeah, but I think for us, it's not just in the Northeast, because, of course, we have programs in the Northwest as well that are targeting ending child marriage. So for all the project sites or all the states where we've worked, not just now, but over the years where we've advocated for girls to be enrolled back in school, where we've had projects that actually identify the girls and put them back into school as well. The problem that COVID has brought on board is that education system was hugely affected by this. Now, the implication of this is that those children that we've already been able to convince to go back to school were left in the house for a period of time. And when someone is idle, of course, they have to find a way to fill that gap. So the implication is that they will decide, okay, there's no school, so let's go back to, be married, basically. And we are not in a position to stop some of these things from happening, because in as much as those in the urban areas were able to do like things like Zoom classes, some online learning, those in the rural areas did not have the same privileges, and therefore there was no way of reaching out to the most deprived kids in the rural areas. So the implication of this is that a lot of the gains that were already recorded, unfortunately, will be eroded, because those that went back to school due to the pandemic will now drop out of school, and for those whose parents were supporting their education through very little means of livelihood, some petty trading and things like that. We all know that businesses were seriously affected. Small businesses were affected by the coronavirus due to the lockdown that came as a result of controlling the spread. So the implication again is that, for such kids, their parents are even struggling to put 3 square meals on the table. So how would they pay for education of those children to continue. So from my perspective, I think those are some of the major effects the COVID-19 pandemic has had on our education system all around, not just the North and East.
And lastly now, Hope, what is your advice for the government so that, or on efforts that can be taken or steps, measures to ensure that we really do stop child marriage in Nigeria?
For me, the main solution I will still bring to the table of government is education of the child. I mean, that's basically what government needs to do, because when you educate the kids, you empower them, and therefore the child starts to think about marriage way after they finish school. So education is the best way for us to go around it, both to address child marriage and also address child labor. Another thing I think the government needs to start looking at is the review of the UBA Act. At this moment, we know it ends at the point of JSS 3. And when you look at the time when most girls drop out of school to get married, is immediately after their junior secondary school. So if we extend the UBE Act to cover senior secondary school, that keeps the girls in school longer. So by the time they are done, hopefully they are close to being 18. So even if they have to get married at that point, they are no longer getting married as innocent children. So that is what I'll ask government to do now. Make sure that policies around protecting the rights of the children are also enforced at every level, from the national to state, local government levels. Ensure that those policies are being enforced, because we do have policies as a country. So that is what I ask government to do at this point.
Well, Hope Oduma there of Save Nigeria International, thank you very much for speaking to us on Analysis. Thank you very much for your time, and well done. Well, with that, we call it a wrap on this episode of Analysis. I am Oyin Adekunle, thanking you for watching. I'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.